Today, I have the pleasure to talk to Richard Wilding. And Richard, you have several different roles. You are the former chairman of the Chartered Institute for Logistics and Transport, the CILT. You're also professor supply chain strategy at the Cranfield University, and you have several advisory roles. So if somebody has a good overview of the COVID-19 impact on the supply chain, I think it's you, and it's great to have you in the show.
It's a pleasure.
And due to this COVID-19, businesses are experiencing really unprecedented challenges. And one of them is finding the balance between their financials and, on the other hand, the customer confidence. So if we look to the supply chain, what role does it play and what resolution strategies should organizations follow and how can they mitigate all kinds of future risks?
Okay, well, I think there's a couple of key issues that people need to be able to think through. And I think one of the first ones that is really important now, and we're starting to see this now as the pandemic is sort of progressing and the disruption to supply chains occurring, and it really is, understand your cost to serve. And this is really quite critical. It requires you to understand how much is it costing me to serve particular customers with a particular product. And really, this is all about, thinking through the service level which is required by, by that particular customer. Because of course we know, if you're ordering it and you want it next day or in the next 2 hours, the cost to serve that is going to be far more than if it's, you're saying, well, as long as you can get it to me in the next week or so. But also it's dependent on the products, because some products are far harder to actually move. They might be very large and bulky, but in terms of their value density, quite low. And what we have been finding is many companies have been very much jumping on, particularly in the world of business to consumer. They've been jumping on online ordering and so on and so forth, home delivery. And what we're seeing is them destroying margin through not understanding the cost to serve. In other words, what they're doing is they're destroying all the potential profit which they could be making because of, if you like, the delivery processes they're putting in place. So I think a real critical issue for all businesses is to make sure that you get the data, get the information, and start building effective cost to serve models. The other challenge which is associated with this is that I sort of use this terminology, location. Many, even big blue chip companies, don't actually know, if you like, the flows within the supply chains globally, where manufacturers are actually located. They might know where a head office is located, but where is that actual physical manufacturing facility? And what are the flows that those goods and materials take through the supply chain to get to, a customer, for example? Because generally these are not the most direct routes. You will find that often things are actually take, if you like, a slightly different route. It might be because of tax efficiency. It might also be because of security issues. It might also just be because those routes are currently open during the pandemic. So by taking things through particular countries and out again, it is just much, much easier because of the nature of the rules which are taking place. And of course, by understanding where things are located and the journey that things are taking through the global supply chain, that also enables you to then start to actually think more carefully about the true cost to serve in terms of being able to get things to your customers. So I think those are two things which would be quite high on most people's agendas. There's lots of different things, depends on the business, what you're dealing with, and so on and so forth. But, location, and understand your cost to serve are really foundational principles you need to have in place at this time.
Great insights. And you speak to many different organizations and supply chain teams. So some have end-to-end process owners, other ones focus on process automation. What type of approach do you see that really work to take around the business processes?
Well, one of the key things is when we start to think about supply chain strategy, I generally, at the end of the day, you've got to understand what is creating value for the customer. You then have to understand the competitive strategy. And really, that is all about how you as a business are going to create value for a customer. The supply chain strategy is all about delivering that value to the customer. And when I look at supply chain strategy, there are really four key things that you need to consider. First is the process design. Really important to think through, well, what is the process design, as you've just mentioned. Think through the infrastructure and equipment that you're actually using as well. So that could be the supply chain network, where warehouses, manufacturing are located, but also the equipment you're using within those areas. You then need to think about the information systems design, but also you need to think about then how people interact with that. During the times that we're currently going through, what you will be finding is, for example, the networks have changed. When the networks change, that generally means your processes are also going to have to adapt and change as well. And also it therefore means your information systems are going to have to probably adapt and change, and the skill sets of the people. So, you know, many organizations now are talking around really a trade-off between information technology, property, and human resources. Because if everybody's working remotely, the focus is do we really need this property still? You know, wherever that might be, in the centre of London or centre of some big city, do I still need that? But what I am going to need, if I don't have it in that way, I'm going to need a different information technology infrastructure, and that then is going to impact, if you like, the re-engineering of all my key processes as well, potentially, so that people can work in a different way. So that process design then becomes quite important. And it might be, for example, we're starting to see with supply chain 4.0, for example, that different businesses are now starting to say, well, okay, what we're going to do in our warehousing facilities is do part of the manufacturing. We might have additive manufacturing or 3D printing taking place within a facility. And what that then means is the infrastructure and the skills which are required actually all change as well. So all these things sort of come together, and you have to sort of think through, well, what are the processes? What's the infrastructure and equipment? What's the information systems, and how are our people, and what are the skills they're going to need to be able to work in this new environment?
And you're talking about information systems, and related to this is the automation, the digitalization. Can you elaborate on the role of emerging technologies like AI, IoT, Internet of Things, and blockchain, both in the short run, but also more looking into the future?
Yeah, well, what we've seen is, I mean, to be quite honest, supply chain 4.0, which includes all those technologies that you've been talking about, has been moving forward quite rapidly over the last couple of years. But what has really happened during the last 4 or 5 months is a burning platform has been put under that. So people are now starting to say, well, can we use these technologies in different ways, and so on and so forth. So we're starting to see people adapting these technologies and applying these technologies more fully. Artificial intelligence, you know, is being used to sort of monitor data streams and basically be able to produce, if you like, better predictions, better forecasts. But we have to understand it's not a magic bullet. There are a lot of environments where it still does not work. You know, some of the traditional mechanisms that we have for, say, forecasting are far more effective. So it's a tool that you can use, but make sure you use it in the right place. You know, you might have artificial intelligence, you know, being a hammer. If you're trying to put a screw into the wall, you're better off using a screwdriver. Don't hammer it in with the artificial intelligence. Generally makes a bit of a mess. So, you know, you've got to be careful and understand the strengths of these different approaches as you're moving forward. Blockchain, of course, really important. But I mean, this is enabling us to get auditable traceability within supply chain processes. But once again, companies need to actually be pragmatic and think about the adoption of that technology. It's not going to solve every single problem that's out there, but it will, you know, in terms of understanding provenance, for example, in certain supply chains, it can be used once again as a tool. But we've got some interesting things happening, because of course, if we're looking at blockchain in its tradition, you know, some of its traditional formats like Bitcoin, the energy consumption and the sustainability side of using the blockchain is currently being challenged. And so I think the principles are really important, but are we going to see those evolve in the future so that they're less energy intensive, if that makes sense, as we move forward?
Richard, thanks again for joining our show and sharing your valuable insights and learnings. And for the audience, thank you for watching, and see you next time.